Hello and welcome to AcadiaSoft's Market Update on Phase 5 UMR Implementation Extension. I'm Mike Wilson, CEO and founder of Ditto, and I'm delighted to be joined today by John Pucciarelli, Director of Strategic Initiatives at AcadiaSoft. Hello, John.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Very good, thank you. John, so I remember this time 100 days ago, kind of end of July, the Phase 5 UMR Implementation Extension was decided upon and announced to the market. Maybe for our listeners, you just recap what that extension meant and why it came about.
Yeah, sure, Mike. And it's amazing that 100 days have passed. I feel like it just happened, but a lot has happened since the BCBS and IOSCO statement back in July. Just for listeners and to recap, there were actually two things in kind of short order, where there was the 1-year extension and also the threshold relief. But talk about the 1-year extension for Phase 5. Basically, what the regulators or what BCBS and IOSCO had recommended was that they were going to move a certain portion of the Phase 5, which was scheduled to go into compliance in 2020, to kind of essentially add a 6th phase that will be in 2021. Those firms in Phase 6 were all firms that had ANA or average aggregate notional amount above an 8 billion. That's the new Phase 6. And then the new Phase 5 were any firms that had an ANA that was greater than 50 billion. So essentially, they just added a new phase, and the whole point of that was to give those smaller firms a little bit more time to get compliant. And then, of course, on top of that was the $50 million threshold relief, which basically stated that the framework or the rules do not specify documentation, custodial, operational requirements if the bilateral initial margin amount does not exceed the $50 million initial threshold. So that's kind of the update, and that's kind of the reminder of where we were in terms of, or where we are in terms of that advocacy and that relief.
So, John, I remember at the time last July, you were saying, look, time is on your side until it's not. So what has been the impact of this extension on Phase 5 clients from your view in the market over the last 100 days?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, we have now come to 100 days. I think firms have now had an opportunity to digest it all. We have heard from other regulators in terms of their opinions, and largely it's all, I would say completely, not largely, completely all in line. We've had the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the HKMA, the CFTC here in the US, the JFSA in Japan, and the USPRs. We had MOZ in Singapore and Korea regulators, and OFSI in Canada, all kind of come out with their recommendations or their agreement on the BCBS and IOSCO statement that came out 100 days ago. So a lot has happened in that space. Some of those regulators are in the kind of the phase of their receiving comments and comment periods from the industry on that. But largely, it was what we expected in terms of all of those regulators agreeing to the threshold relief and agreeing to the extension for Phase 6, and there was a few other things in there as well. But there are some few nuances. But those two main issues they all kind of agreed on, and now we're in the point where we're educating clients that exists. So now we can inform them in terms of what the solutions are out there that are going to help with that extension and help with the threshold relief as well.
So clients haven't deferred their project work, John. They're still working on it now. They haven't kind of down tools at all. There's no room for complacency. Yeah,
agreed. Especially for the Phase 5 firms, the firms that were in Phase 5 and that are still in Phase 5, even after they've looked at their ANA and had the relief. They are not pens down. They are working diligently through their project plans. I would say Phase 6 is a little bit mixed as far as I can tell from the clients. There are quite a bit of clients who know now that they're in Phase 6, or they're assuming that they're in Phase 6, and they're kind of just taking a little bit more of a step back to look at their plans. But we do have a lot of Phase 6 firms that are still planning as if they were phase 5, and they're still kind of moving forward, even though they do have enough time to do so.
I'd like to explore really this kind of $50 billion average accurate notional amount of kind of threshold, and what's that meant for the industry, and also what it's meant for AcadiaSoft and the monitoring of that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And so what that threshold release has done, and we hadn't spoken about this 100 days out, but what it has done is created a requirement for firms who are in scope, meaning that they are in either phase 5 or in phase 6, that if they're not going to breach that 50 million, there's a requirement now to monitor their threshold against their exposure. Firms, a lot of the dealers are looking at solutions to handle this. Some are thinking about doing it one-to-one with their clients, which would mean a lot of emails and notifications back and forth. But what AcadiaSoft has done, and we have listened to the market, since that 100 days that we spoke, we've created something called IM Threshold Monitoring. And basically, that's in direct response to the regulatory guidelines that we just spoke about from BCBS and IOSCO. And part of our IM monitoring service, our threshold monitoring service, is also part of our Acadia Plus Risk Suite services. But basically, what this service is going to do is give a centralized location for all of the sell-side clients, all of the buy-side clients in phase 5 and phase 6, to view their threshold against their exposures with data that their dealers will upload into a user interface that they can go and centrally look at across all of their dealer relationships. And it will give them the certainty that they know that they're either below that threshold and they don't have to repaper, or that they're getting close to their threshold, and will give them ample time to start the repapering and the operational process. And again, it's kind of a one-stop shop where the dealers can see all of their client relationships, and all of their clients can see all of their dealer relationships in one place, in one time, and then they can appropriately take the steps to get compliant before any type of thing like trading halts or anything like that happens. So that's kind of one of the bigger things that have come out for us, for AcadiaSoft, since the announcement of the relief has happened.
Great. And what has the market response been like to IM Threshold Monitoring and this new service?
Yeah, it's been very positive. As soon as we heard about the relief, we started working groups with our owner banks, and even other sell-side institutions that aren't owner banks, to get their opinion on the service, and it's been overwhelmingly positive. We are in the stage now of development, and we're really close to putting a product to market by the end of this year, and we have a few different phases because there's some bells and whistles that we're actually building on top of it to deal with things like separately managed account issues, which basically are the problems around when you have a pension fund or an insurance company that has multiple asset managers. You can't necessarily see those thresholds across asset managers. So those are some of the things that we're looking into and we're working on. But yeah, this has been quite positive, and we are really close to the end of the development stage here.
Great. So it's a bit like your early warning radar, things getting closer to your threshold limit. You've got plenty of ample time then to implement the repapering process. And just to close out, John, if there we're coming to the end of 2019. If there were, for our listeners here, the 3 most important things that they should be thinking about as a closeout this year and get into next year, if they're in scope for phase 5, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, I don't think a lot has changed. I do know that any firms that are phase 5 that are coming into scope in 2020, you definitely need to have your projects in place to calculate SIM, to reconcile SIM. How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it in-house? Or are you going to use a vendor like AcadiaSoft IM, which is the industry standard to do that? Talking to your custodians, making sure that your legal documentation is kind of moving forward, and that doesn't just mean your regulatory CSAs, your ISDAs, but also your account control agreements and your custodial documentations as well. And thinking about how you're going to negotiate that. Are you going to do it the old-fashioned way, through Word document and email between 2 counterparties, or leverage some of the electronic and digitized offerings out there that are poised to make that process a lot easier. And then, it's really looking at talking to your dealers and making sure that you're testing. I would say, we've been talking to our clients and making sure that, they're getting involved in our working groups. Our phase 5 working group is essential for our clients to understand what they're, how they should be testing, when they should be testing. We give them updates on the new versions of SIM and et cetera. So I would say, closing out 2019 into 2020, there's going to be a ton of work to do next year, especially for phase 5. We're talking about quite a large number, the largest number that we've seen ever in the compliance schedule, and it's only going to get bigger as we go into 2021. So still a lot of work to do. We have all the solutions for those clients. Now it's a matter of getting them, ready to do it and kind of shepherding them across the finish line and making sure that they're fully compliant by the time they go live.
Yeah, it was great. Well, it's great, and hats off to AcadiaSoft for the product innovation with the IM Threshold Manager with the 50 billion threshold piece. So we've got phase 5, phase 6. I heard someone whispering about a phase 7, John, so I think we'll be at this for a little bit of time yet. Would you come back again in 100 days' time and let us know how you're getting on then at the end of Q1, maybe next year?
Absolutely. I think, a lot will change in 100 days. We're still waiting for the revised RTS out of Europe, and that will have not only the threshold relief confirmation from the Europeans as well as the extension, but other things around SIM model validation and some derogation on equity option extension. So there's a lot coming out from the Europeans that should be the end of this month. So I think in 100 days we'll know a lot more, and would love to come back and talk about that.
Great. We'll have IM Threshold Manager launched as well. So, John, I know your inbox is always open. So, if folk want to get involved, reach out to John and in the notes below, and also maybe hook up to their working groups, which are fantastic across the market, a real place for people across the ecosystem to come together and collaborate. John, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side in 2020.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.